Are you in search of a board game that will have you bracing the elements? Or are you simply a fan of rolling dice, worker placement games, and building a cool engine? Well, do I have the perfect game for you. It's called Brew. Let's go check it out. Is it the end of the round already? I guess we can reclaim our dice and re-roll them. Here goes nothing. Thank you for making this tea, bro. It was dice-licious. Brew is an area-controlled dice placement game where players take in the role of mystics as they explore the forest to gather ingredients and formulate potions with the ultimate goal of taming the lands altogether. In this video, we will look at the many different game elements and mechanics that make up this beautiful game Brew and classify them as either brutal or brilliant. At the beginning of each game, each player will control a character, each with its own unique special abilities and powers. The characters are quirky, have their own coloured forage dice and element dice. These cool personas become your avatars as you step into the world of Brew. Throughout the game, players will be traversing across 4 distinct rounds, placing their forage dice and element dice either on the forest cards or on the village space, triggering any effects as they go. The main village board has 2 sides which flip over at the beginning of each round. Some of the village spaces allows players to train animals, gain ingredients for their potions, revealing and reserving potions for future turns, or scorching the forest spaces. Players will need to ensure that the dice they place satisfy the requirements outlined on the village board. Some spaces are reserved exclusively for element dice, as outlined by these fire, water, and wind symbols. It kind of reminds me of the TV show The Last Airbender. The forest cards is where the crux of the game primarily occurs. The forest cards come in 4 different suits representing the seasons of spring, summer, winter, and autumn. Some forest cards even have 2 seasons associated with them. Each player has 4 forage dice that they primarily use to claim spaces on the forest cards. If a symbol in the forest matches a symbol on a forage die that has been rolled, it can be placed there, earning the player an ingredient as well as control over that forest card. Players are ultimately jockeying for as much control over the forest cards as possible, which allows them to claim the card at the end of the round and securing some important points for the end of the game. Element dice can be placed into the forest to trigger some special additional dice manipulating effects. A fire die can be used to block an opponent's forage die, making it not count at the end of the round. A water die can be used to gain 2 of a resource rather than 1 from an empty forest space, while a wind die can be used to replace an existing forage die, freeing it up, allowing it to be used somewhere else. The way that the game uses forage dice in multiple ways to fill up spaces on the forest cards and to help players gather ingredients is incredibly brilliant. I love trying to solve the puzzle around the faces that I've rolled on my forage dice and how they can be used to effectively claim as many of those forest cards that appear each and every round. Having the extra additional actions of the element dice allows players to exert some sort of control and balance throughout the game in terms of gathering more ingredients, reclaiming a dice that they've already placed out, or even blocking another player's control on a forest space. All of these additive effects and having 2 types of dice in the game means that already, in addition to the plethora of actions that you get from potion cards and animal cards, these dice actions makes this game super thinky and calculated, which is brilliant. Brew is a game that is super interactive, where people often feel like they're getting in each other's way, kind of like a swarm of hungry eaters at an all-you-can-eat 24-hour buffet. Everyone wants a piece. The area control element is the heart of Brew. Players are setting up and planning multiple turns ahead to try and safely secure particular forest cards. What can happen, however, is that if several players want the same forest card, they can use their dice actions and potions to disrupt your plans completely, sometimes leaving you empty-handed or behind, which is brutal. Brewing potions by using ingredients collected from the forest provides players with one-time use abilities that help them to manipulate the dice on the forest cards or even scorch those empty spaces to try and swing the game in their favour.
Each potion has a cost requirement listed in the top left corner of the card. Some of the abilities that the potions provide include removing a placed element die, scorching an empty forest space so no other players can use it, placing an extra die on your turn, re-rolling a die, moving a forage die to an empty forest space, or even changing the faces of your rolled dice. These potions provide endgame points and cool surprising actions that influence who dominates the forest throughout the game, which is brilliant.
Have you ever wanted your own pet or to train your own animal? Well, now you can. You can train an entire kooky forest of wildlife animals straight into your possession, exploit their abilities, and release them back into the forest again from where you found them. In this game, players can train animals to gain extra dice placement spots, which give them effects that attune them to the certain playstyle that they wish to exhibit throughout the game.
Training a forest creature requires using a die to trigger this creature fang symbol. Players can own up to 3 active creatures at one time, and they can also release them into the forest if they want to acquire any additional ones. The different types of animals originate from the 4 different seasons. The spring animals provides players with lots of ways to acquire energy berries, which acts as a wild ingredient when purchasing potion cards. The summer animals primarily help to scorch forest spaces by removing their access to the other players, as well as giving players the power to change the faces of their element dice. The autumn animals allows players to gather each of the 3 different ingredients, and the winter animals allows players to score endgame victory points when they initiate certain types of actions on their turn. Having the power to select different bonus actions for your dice means that the branching decision options and worker placement choices that you have on your turn multiplies, which is brilliant.
Scoring at the end of the game involves adding all of the green victory points on claimed forest cards, trained animal cards, and potion cards, as well as any leftover ingredients or victory point chips that you have in your possession.
There is some synergy in the scoring when it comes to matching the creatures trained throughout the game and the season types of the forests that have been claimed. For example, this player has released a winter animal that would usually only be worth 1 victory point at the end of the game, but because this player claimed a winter forest card, it flips over and this animal is now worth 3 victory points.
The engine building element as a result of the placement of the dice in the game of Brew is brilliant. There are so many different places and actions and effects and combos to explore on both the potion cards as well as the spaces on the trained animal cards, in combination with the flipping village board, means that there's so much to explore and synergy that you can uncover with each and every game that you play. It is important to note that this game features a high level of player-to-player interaction, and it can be a little bit social and political at times as well, especially when it's centered around trying to claim these forest cards in this region, and this can be quite divisive between players. Players might find that they're trying to invest their actions to try and claim 1 or 2 forest cards for only those cards to be taken away from them by another player using a potion card, and that can be a little bit frustrating, especially when you don't get any cards at the end of a round. Vice versa, you can have 2 or 3 players trying to stop one other player from getting what they need because they're just dominating and they're in the lead, and that can feel a little bit brutal. Adore the unique theme, the incredibly high quality components, including these colored etched dice, I didn't really feel like I was brewing potions per se. I felt like the brewing potions element of this entire game kind of felt like a side game overall. I felt that the main part of the game, in terms of what I was doing and the strategy and the thinking, revolved around trying to claim these forest cards. I felt like the brew theme was kind of filtered throughout the rest of the game. What I actually like in the game Brew is the synergy between the dice effects and the card actions, and it creates for a really cohesive engine building system where you play a die onto your card, you gain resources which you can use to buy potions, and then using those potions to manipulate the forest field. That little trigger and chain effect that occurs at the game is incredibly brilliant. But the true aspect of the game that I really thought was incredibly cool was how thinky and how deep your brain can go in terms of analyzing all of the different decisions you can make for the one die that you are going to place on your turn. And if a game can make me think that deeply about where I'm gonna place one die and how that's gonna actually help me win the game, then that to me is brilliant. In considering my final thoughts, Brew is a beautiful game that has a high level of player interaction and an incredibly unique theme. If you're prepared for the cutthroat nature of the game that it offers to you, then brew some tea and add it to your game list. Thank you once again for joining me for another Board Game Sanctuary video. If you really like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also comment about what you thought of Brew in the comment section below. I can't wait to have a discussion with you guys. Also, if you have some time, go and check my Facebook page, like it, follow, and get all the latest updates from this board game channel. In addition, if you want to become a Board Game Sanctuarian, don't forget to check out my Patreon page. This is Danny signing out. I'm brewing some more tea. Can't wait to see you on the other side. Enjoy your next game. Goodbye. Wait a minute. I asked for 1 sugar cube, not 2.